Welcome back to Two Hearts, where stories are weaved to explore the beauty of diverse cultures and the depths of human connection. When a connection is forged from childhood trust, immeasurable loss, and exploratory firsts, it has the makings of a perfect relationship. But when faced with competing interests, misguided support, and a life-altering secret, will it ultimately be sacked for a loss? In this game being played for keeps, follow Sybil and Lucas as they prove that there's always a chance to win as long as there's time left on the clock. Please enjoy calling in Audible. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so that more members of our community can continue to find content like this.
Dying on the toilet in a professional sports complex was not how Sybil Moore envisioned her final moments. "Get it together, Sybil. You can do this," she wheezed softly between choppy, hyperventilating breaths. Secured in a stall in a pristine bathroom that appeared as if it had never been used, she was seated on the commode, leaning over in an effort to regulate her breathing and thwart a wave of tears threatening to fall. Unconvinced that she wasn't dying, she attempted everything in her power to slow her heart rate. Panic attack. Sybil had never experienced one before, but imagined that every symptom ricocheting through her body right now undoubtedly fit the description of one. It was the perfect spring day. She was dressed to the nines and had been in the middle of one of the biggest presentations of her career when, out of the shadows at the back of the room, she saw him. Her past, her heartbreak, her betrayal. It had been 10 long years, but in a matter of seconds, recognition had dawned, and all the pain and anguish from a previous life had unceremoniously come rushing back. Professional that she was, Sybil had maintained her air of authority and expertise, laboring through the presentation to the full auditorium for the allotted hour. She'd remained affable, engaging, and poised. When the final Q&A inquiry had been answered and the session had ended, however, Sybil avoided several stragglers seeking to pick her brain further or those who eyed her in an attempt to get to know her better in an unprofessional setting, and made a beeline for the nearest restroom. Cliff Haven was a quiet northeastern town nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling river. Thick as thieves, two children's laughter echoed through the summer air like the intense beating of dragonflies' wings. Sybil Moore, a vibrant girl with curly ponytails that defied gravity and perpetually sun-kissed skin, and Lucas Spencer, a curious boy with a mop of sandy hair and a devious, dimpled grin, were inseparable. Although not necessarily friends, Sybil's and Lucas's parents had all been friendly due to how taken with one another the children had been throughout their primary school years. Dutiful parents that entertained their children's requests for playdates and other supervised outings, the expectation had always been that the youthful playmates would eventually grow out of their infatuation with one another. But as time passed, their bond only deepened. They shared everything: secrets, dreams, and in 5th grade, a week of detention after delivering black eyes to a pair of classmates, one who'd blindside tackled Sybil during a game of touch football at recess, and the other who proceeded to explain that girls were useless at sports and shouldn't be allowed to play when she lay crying on the sidelines, the wind knocked out of her. Transitioning to high school, their tried and true friendship knew no bounds. They'd stayed days at a time at each other's houses, had regularly eaten their parents out of house and home, and had always been included on each other's annual family trips. During the summer of their sophomore year, they'd grieved together when Sybil's father had been killed in a military conflict overseas. After the loss of her husband, Mrs. Moore had become withdrawn and stricter with Sybil, but understanding the immense loss that her daughter was also experiencing, she'd allowed for her home to be a safe space for Sybil and Lucas to maintain their friendship. By their senior year, that friendship had blossomed into something more. The first time Lucas held Sybil's hand, it felt like the world had shifted beneath their feet. The first time they'd kissed, neither could fathom a world where the other was not present in it. Their love story became the stuff of legend in Cliff Haven, a tale of two hearts intertwined, practically since birth. Lucas, with his charismatic smile and athletic prowess, had been the star quarterback of their school's football team. Sybil, a gifted writer and editor of the school newspaper, had a sharp wit and an even sharper tongue. Their friendship-turned-relationship was the envy of their peers and had developed into a whirlwind of stolen kisses, whispered promises, and a shared vision of a future together. But beneath the surface, cracks began to appear. Sybil's family, while well-respected within their community, struggled to remain a part of the local zeitgeist since Mr. Moore's death. Between his will, pension, and the military survivors' benefits all set up for his family, the Moores maintained financial stability, but Evelyn Moore had become increasingly withdrawn, ultimately retreating from polite society altogether, rejecting the clubs and organizations where true social hierarchy and acceptance were measured and enforced. Lucas's family, on the other hand, remained wealthy pillars of the community, and their expectations for him were as high as their social standing. Although sympathetic to the Moore's plight, Lucas's parents, particularly his mother, began to question his choice of partner, hinting at the myriad of challenges they might face in an unpredictable and unforgiving world. Despite their parents' apathy or misgivings, Mrs. Moore's endless forlornness, and the Spencers' wariness, when they finally left for college, the pair promised to keep their love alive. Dorm stayovers, shared classes, and weekend dates kept them connected. But the reality of ball is life, arduous academic schedules, and contrasting friend groups all began to take their toll on the two. Sybil's life became a delicate balance of caring for her mother and pursuing her dreams. She made the 8-hour round-trip drive home every weekend to visit Evelyn, who remained in a barely functioning depressive state. To quell her own worries, Sybil took on the role of maintaining their home, paying bills, and hiring a housekeeper to ensure that someone was regularly on site to keep the structure standing and ensure that Evelyn remembered to eat and was otherwise cared for. Sybil often spent time with their housekeeper Sylvia, heavily invested in the memory of the home life she knew before going off to college. One morning, after the two of them had grocery shopped and were preparing the evening meal of penne all'arrabbiata, Sybil had run abruptly from the kitchen to the half-bath in the hallway to empty the contents of her stomach. When Sybil returned, looking wrung out and exhausted, Sylvia regarded her with a knowing sadness. "Dios mío," she murmured, her voice filled with concern and a hint of disappointment. Sybil's fears were confirmed at the Student Health Services clinic the following week. She was pregnant, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Overwhelmed by their studies and other responsibilities, Sybil decided to keep the pregnancy a secret, hoping to find the right moment to tell Lucas. One fateful weekend, thanks to a bye in his football schedule, Lucas decided to accompany Sybil on her weekend haunt home. They'd hung out at his parents' house, let the gushing adults take them out to dinner, and then rounded out the trip by checking in with Sylvia and spending time with Sybil's mother. It was clear that Evelyn had lost a considerable amount of weight, and like Sylvia had mentioned, she'd been determined to spend her days in bed or locked away in her father's old study. Speaking in hushed tones, Sybil promised the housekeeper that she would research some licensed grief counselors who were local and that made house calls. As the pair said their goodbyes, the sudden shift in their mood reflected the overcast skies that were settling in overhead. Taking the familiar interstate back to school, neither had much to say as long beats of awkward silence stretched between them. After an agonizing hour, Lucas caressed her arm. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "Fine," Sybil smiled bravely. "Syb?" he inquired. It's exhausting having to be responsible for everything when I need She trailed off. "What do you need, Syb?" Lucas asked, turning in the passenger seat to look at her more fully. "Nothing," she said quickly, not wanting to bring their newest challenge to light just yet. "I'm just juggling a lot of balls right now, and I only have 2 hands. I don't want to overstep here, but have you considered that your mother might benefit from a clinical depression diagnosis?" Lucas asked her delicately. Sybil, already on edge, took offense at his unsolicited opinion. "Who do you think you are judging my mother?" Sybil snapped, her anger boiling over. "Sybil, wait. That's not what I meant at all. You know I love your mother. She's always been kind to me. We just see her suffering in silence and you having to pick up the slack, and just wondered if you both would be willing to seek professional help," he explained. "We? So you and your parents discuss my mother when things get boring in Cliff Haven?" Sybil snapped. She knew she was being unfair to him, but she was hurting, embarrassed, and at a loss as to how to navigate her own earth-tilting issues. The argument escalated as they drove, the rain deciding at that moment to pour down, blurring the road ahead. Turning back and forth between Lucas's angry face and the hazy windshield, Sybil's focus was split. Not recognizing that she was approaching a slick spot in the road much faster than she should have been, her car began to hydroplane. Realizing her miscalculation belatedly, Sybil turned the wheel, but overcorrected in the process. The fishtail that ensued caused the sedan to careen across 3 lanes of traffic and into an embankment on the side of the road.
Between the battering rain, the broken glass, the indecipherable moans, and being transported to the hospital by EMS, everything after the wreck had felt like it was occurring in a fog. Thankfully, Lucas had only suffered minor scrapes and superficial injuries. He'd refused a gurney and had only ridden in the ambulance to accompany Sybil. Upon arrival at the hospital, however, the attending physician had insisted that he be admitted for overnight observation to ensure there were no internal injuries that were overlooked. Once he was settled in a room just down the hall, the doctor returned to assess Sybil's condition. She'd expected the concussion and fractured wrist based on the incessant throbbing in those areas of her body, but Sybil's world shattered when he'd regretfully mentioned her miscarriage. As plans were made for the 3 specialists Sybil would have to see before being discharged, the doctor's words continued to echo in her mind. Sybil was heartbroken and gutted by the loss of the child she had planned to tell Lucas about after his season. Unfortunately, that opportunity had been stolen from her. Unsurprisingly, the Spencers had shown up at the hospital before nightfall. Dividing and conquering, while Mitchell Spencer had checked on Lucas, Kimberly Spencer visited Sybil, her eyes filled with sympathy. When she'd optimistically asked if her mother was en route, having no one else to turn to, Sybil brokenly confessed her loss, and although Mrs. Spencer's expression was initially one of shock, she hugged Sybil tightly as they both cried through the moment of grief. Although she couldn't stay the 2 days that her doctor had insisted Sybil remain admitted, Mrs. Spencer had called several times to check up on Sybil after getting Lucas back to school for his mandatory football practices. Their conversation had begun with offers to help her to replace the totaled car that was currently being towed on the back of a wrecker, to assisting Sybil with getting the appropriate assistance she needed for her mother. The woman's altruism was like music to Sybil's ears and had immediately taken the weight of the world off her fragile shoulders, until Mrs. Spencer had followed up with a casual statement about what a good fit Sybil would be for a recent opening in the prestigious Annenberg journalism program. Not understanding what the woman was suggesting, considering that her dream program was on the other side of the country and Sybil hadn't even applied because of her mother's mental decline, she frankly asked Mrs. Spencer what she was talking about. Carefully, the woman referenced each of the undue burdens and distractions that occupied Sybil's life and made it difficult for her to focus on her education. She shared that she was aware that USC was her dream school and that she was more than happy to help Sybil obtain admittance to that dream. Naively, Sybil asked Mrs. Spencer what about hers and Lucas's plans, and the woman's response was like a knife to her heart. I am humbled that you trusted me enough to share such painful news with me. I am concerned, however, that discussing such a traumatic matter with Lucas may cause him to spiral," Mrs. Spencer explained, her voice laced with concern. "I can't just keep the miscarriage from him, and transferring to another school would break his heart," Sybil said incredulously. "I know you love Lucas and want the best for him. In addition to his studies, he has the weight of an entire Power 5 program on his back. If it was in your power to keep him from being upset or hurt, wouldn't you do it?" Mrs. Spencer asked. "Yes," Sybil answered softly. "And in terms of your dreams, I would ask the same of him. He knows what a dream come true USC would be for you, and because he loves you, I know he'd want the best for you. This is for the best, Sybil. Your mother will have a comfortable life, and both you and Lucas will have the opportunities you deserve. Think about it, and let me know what you decide." Although she'd returned to school only a little worse for wear on the outside, she was a wreck on the inside. Sybil could no longer find the normalcy in her daily life, despite Lucas's insistence that they designate what free time they had for one another. Instead, she spent a week thinking about the effects of her father's death on her mother's mental health and ultimately decided that she never wanted to cause Lucas that kind of pain.
True to Mrs. Spencer's word, after submitting her materials, Sybil had received the acceptance letter to USC almost immediately. The eventual conversation with Lucas, however, had been devastating. Although agreeing to bury the secret of their lost pregnancy deep, little by little, she died inside when she told Lucas of her opportunity to transfer and couldn't give him a good reason as to why she suddenly wanted to leave. He'd hated the idea and had even called his parents to complain about Sybil's selfishness. But on the other side of that conversation, he'd concluded that he didn't want to be the reason that she didn't pursue her dreams. Like she knew he would, Lucas had agreed to a long-distance relationship, knowing they'd always have the summers to reunite. But as time passed, their lives drifted further apart. Sybil's prospects multiplied, and Lucas's dedication to football had left little room for anything else. Things had worked out for a while until they hadn't. Her mother was responding well to the treatment she'd been receiving, freeing Sybil from the worry that had made spreading her wings impossible. She'd gained internship opportunities and began building a life in California that, while laid the groundwork for her professional future, made traveling back east more challenging than she thought. Lucas spent nearly all of his time thinking about football, playing football, or training for football. He had a year-round commitment to the sport, balancing intense and mandatory workouts, practices, film sessions, and travel in addition to his academic responsibilities. His schedule was occupied by significant time in the off-season and summer for conditioning and development, followed by fall camp and the regular season, so seeing him had been impossible unless they'd planned months in advance. Add to that his status and popularity as the school's starting quarterback, and the cocoon around him and lack of access to him often felt like she was surmounting the highest of mountains. Not seeing one another had become their normal. Sybil's distance was in the interest of self-preservation. Seeing and speaking to Lucas always brought her back to the night of the accident and the immense loss that he would never know about. Lucas, on the other hand, began slowly but surely pulling away as a result of Sybil's physical and emotional distance, as well as the unresolved resentment he felt at her leaving him in the first place. Eventually, Lucas started dating someone else, the heavily vetted and approved daughter of one of his mother's society friends. Sybil had learned the news along with everyone else, watching the pair's intimate embrace on national television after he'd thrown the winning touchdown to secure the school's national championship berth. The realization was like a knife to the heart and had shattered the 15-year connection they'd lovingly cultivated. Hurt and betrayed, Sybil cut all ties, and Lucas, too proud to explain himself, let her go. Years passed, and they built lives far from Cliff Haven. Utilizing every tool afforded to her, Sybil became a renowned PR consultant and strategist
that was sought after across several industries. As expected, Lucas had been a first-round draft pick and had spent 10 years playing professional football before retiring on a high, having preserved his full mobility and cognition. Although both had done well for themselves, each carried the timeless weight of unspoken words and hidden truths with them. Despite moving on, fate now seemed to have a twisted sense of humor. A decade later, they found themselves back in each other's orbits. After splashing water on her face, straightening her suit, and pushing her hair from her face, Sybil exited the bathroom in search of the event coordinator. "Sybil," came a deep voice from behind her. Spinning on her heels, Sybil turned to find Lucas standing there, his presence commanding and familiar all at once. His sandy hair, now flecked with a few sprigs of silver, was styled neatly, and his dimpled grin, though softer, still held a hint of mischief she remembered. His deep blue eyes reflected a mix of surprise and something else, something Sybil couldn't quite decipher. "Lucas," his name fell from her lips in a too-breathless sigh.
Lucas approached her, his steps measured and careful, his heart pounding. "It's been a long time," he said, his own voice barely above a whisper. Sybil met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and longing. "Lucas, you look the same," she replied, attempting to keep her tone cool. "I never expected to see you here," he said, his voice steady but with an underlying current of emotion. "Me either. What are you doing here exactly?" she asked, meeting his gaze. Lucas gestured to the bustling complex around them. "I'm the offensive coordinator for the Wolves. And you?" Despite herself, Sybil had casually followed Lucas's professional endeavors, so she knew that he'd played his entire career and won 2 Super Bowls with the Stallions. She hadn't realized that he'd stayed involved with the league after his retirement. "I'm a public relations consultant. I was hired to provide training this week as a part of the Rookie Player Development Program," she explained as she slipped her professional demeanor back into place. A moment of awkward silence passed between them, the weight of their shared history hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Lucas broke the tension with a small, tentative smile. "It's really good to see you, Sybil. Really good." "You too, Lucas," Sybil nodded. That night, after ordering room service and executing her nightly routine for bed, Sybil lay in the dark, thinking of the day's events. How was she going to survive the rest of the week on Lucas's turf? After the shock of seeing him after so many years, he hadn't done much more than greet her cordially. But that intense gaze and those dimples had nearly been her undoing. His voice was rich and refined, and when he said her name, her heart hammered in her chest wildly as she fought down a mixture of despair and longing. 4 more days, Sybil said aloud into the dark room, before rolling over and drifting off to sleep. The next morning, Sybil woke up with a jolt, her heart racing. The dream of Lucas had been so vivid, so real, that she could almost feel his presence in the room. She threw off the covers and headed to the shower, the hot water doing little to ease the tension in her muscles. As she dressed, she couldn't help but wonder how the day would unfold. Would Lucas be as cordial as he had been the day before, or would his mask slip? As she made her way to the auditorium, Sybil's heels clicked against the polished floors, echoing her hurried steps. The complex was a bustling hive of activity, with players and staff rushing in every direction. She spotted Lucas across the room, deep in conversation with the group of players. His presence commanded attention, and Sybil found herself drawn to him despite her best efforts to stay focused. Throughout the day, Sybil and Lucas navigated their roles with professionalism, but the air was thick with unspoken words. During a break, Lucas approached her,
his expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Sybil, may I speak with you for a moment?" he asked, his voice low. "Of course, Lucas. What's up?" Sybil answered with more cordiality than she truly felt. "I just wanted to apologize for any discomfort this might cause." He pointed between the two of them. "I know seeing one another was unexpected, and I don't want it to affect the work you've been hired to do here." "It's fine, Lucas. We're both professionals. Let's just focus on the task at hand," she said. "Right. Of course." Lucas looked like he wanted to say more, but as the auditorium began filling up with players, several looking on curiously at their OC and the hot PR lady, he decided to table the conversation. Although Sybil and Lucas found themselves working in closely and amiably together as the week progressed, neither could dislodge the dormant tension that was nestled snugly between them. Later that evening, Sybil found herself in her hotel room, the events of the day playing on a loop in her mind. After their initial conversation, she'd managed to avoid Lucas for the rest of the day, but the memory of that encounter lingered, a bittersweet reminder of what they'd once had and the time that had passed between them. She had just finished her shower as a soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Pulling her robe closed and tying it securely, Sybil hesitated only a moment before checking the peephole, then opening the door. On the other side, Lucas stood like a sentinel, his expression a mix of determination and vulnerability. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, not looking the least bit apologetic. "How did you know what hotel?"
"I told Karen and administration that you'd left your purse in the auditorium and that I'd be happy to deliver it to you," he explained. "I'm filing a complaint with your front office," she said, folding her arms across her chest. "Please don't. Karen retires at the end of the season, and she needs her pension money to pay for her cat's surgery," Lucas said. "What kind of surgery?" Sybil asked as she pursed her lips. "Cataracts," he replied, deadpanned. "I'm calling the cops," Sybil stated. "May I come in?" Lucas asked. "I don't think your wife would appreciate that," she pointed out. "I never married," he noted. "Well, your girlfriend then," Sybil corrected. "I don't have a girlfriend," Lucas shrugged. "Fine, your baby mama." She swallowed down a smirk. "Now you're just fishing, and I'm flattered," Lucas grinned, and his dimples immediately took center stage. After looking at one another for a prolonged moment, Sybil stepped aside, allowing him entrance into her suite. As he settled onto the couch in the sitting room, she perched on the edge of the chair opposite him, her posture rigid and defensive. "What do you want, Lucas?" "To talk about us, Sybil. About what happened and why we drifted apart. I think it's time we faced the truth," he said. Sybil's heart raced as she remembered the secrets she kept and the pain she had endured alone. "The truth?" she echoed, her voice laced with bitterness. "You want to talk about the truth, Lucas. Fine. Let's start with the fact that you never once reached out to me to end things. You just moved on, like I meant nothing to you." Lucas flinched at her unexpected words, but his expression remained steady. "Sybil, I know things ended badly between us, and I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you," he said, his eyes searching hers. Sybil's anger surged to the surface. "Sorry? You're sorry? You have no idea what you put me through, Lucas. You just moved on with your life, leaving me to pick up the pieces. And now, after all these years, you think an apology is enough?" Lucas's face paled. "That's not fair, Sybil. Weren't you the one who left? Your mother, your dreams, USC. You chose all of that over us." "I was hurt too, Sybil. I loved you, and you just disappeared." "Disappeared? I was grieving, Lucas. My mother's mental health was in decline, and I had to be there for her. And the miscarriage. I lost our... Sybil cut off abruptly, forgetting herself in that brief moment of raw emotion. Lucas's eyes widened in shock. Miscarriage? What are you talking about, Sybil? Sybil took a deep breath, steeling herself for the long overdue confession. The night of the accident, Lucas, I was already 6 weeks pregnant. We were going to have a baby. If Lucas hadn't already been sitting, he would have stumbled backward in disbelief. Instead, he shot up and crossed the room to stand directly in front of her. Not liking the ominous expression staring down at her, Sybil also stood. Why, Syb? Why didn't you tell me? He managed to choke out. Tears streamed down Sybil's face as she recalled the pain and the loss. I was scared, Lucas. Scared of the responsibility, of the uncertainty. And then, after the accident, I lost the baby. I didn't know how to tell you, how to make you understand the depth of my grief and my guilt. And you didn't think that after everything we'd been through, that I wouldn't want to know, that I wouldn't understand? Lucas asked, his voice strained. I was doing what I thought was best for both of us at the time. Sybil tried to explain through hot tears. But it wasn't your decision to make alone, Lucas thundered, before doubling over as if in pain. Luke, I understand how you must feel. Sybil began as she knelt beside him, daring to touch his shoulder. Don't, Sybil, he growled as he moved out of her reach. I don't know how I could have ever loved someone so selfish and deceitful. I can't even look. Instead of finishing the harsh sentence, Lucas roared a string of invectives at the top of his lungs. Uncaring about the frightened look on her face, Lucas rose to his feet. Rubbing his eyes and wiping his own tear-streaked face, he moved purposefully toward the hotel room door before yanking it open and slamming it shut behind him. Emotionally raw and exhausted following their heated exchange the night before, Sybil showed up to the Wolves training facility on autopilot. Her sessions were still informative and customized to the team's specifications, but the unique style and charisma she was known for, and that had several players returning for a refresher course, was noticeably absent. After wrapping up her final class of the afternoon, Sybil left the auditorium and made her way to the bay of offices at the opposite end of the building. Understandably, she hadn't seen Lucas all day, but after such a charged evening, she wanted to at least apologize to him properly. She knew the words were likely 10 years too late, but if they were to get through the rest of the week and not end up airing out their dirty laundry in front of the incoming class of new players who'd already been glancing at them speculatively since her first day on site, then she had to at least try. Good afternoon, my name is Sybil Moore. I'm just stopping by for a quick meeting following my initial session conversation with Coach Spencer yesterday. Sybil embellished, her voice full of poise and confidence as she approached the receptionist's desk. Good afternoon, Miss Moore. I'm sorry, but I'm not showing any meetings for Coach Spencer, the receptionist Stacy said behind a confused smile. We spoke informally yesterday but didn't get to finish our conversation. It's likely that with all the busyness of the day, I doubt he's had a chance to add it to his calendar yet. Sybil explained rationally. Unfortunately, he isn't in today, Stacy noted as she clicked her mouse several times. Actually, I'm not sure when he will be back. Oh, well, whenever he does return, please let him know that I stopped by, Sybil stammered, caught off guard by the news. Surprised by the revelation, but drawing on the professionalism to still thank Stacy for her assistance, Sybil beat a hasty retreat from the building before her emotions could get the best of her. Once she returned to her hotel room and had settled in for the evening, she spent her final waking moments wondering where Lucas was.
She no longer had a way to get in touch with him, so she was left hoping that he was okay and was regulating his emotions in a healthy way. What Sybil hadn't known was that while she had been searching for Lucas, he was searching for the truth. After Sybil had delivered the worst blindside Lucas had ever experienced, he was at a loss for what to do. Knowing he wouldn't be able to focus on anything in his current state, he packed a bag and headed for the airport.
The red-eye back to Cliff Haven had him arriving in his hometown early the next morning. After making an important stop, he headed to his childhood home. Using his key, he entered to find his parents seated at the kitchenette, looking out the window overlooking the lake in the distance.
Oh my goodness! Lucas, what are you doing here?
Mrs. Spencer saw her son first and immediately rushed from the table to greet him. "Good morning, Mother," Lucas said tiredly as he embraced her and then his father. Lucas apologized for dropping in unannounced before explaining needing a reprieve from all the craziness at work. "That's a scary thought, considering the season hasn't started yet," his father ribbed as he hugged him again before heading out for his early tea time. Taking the vacated seat that his father had left warm for him, Lucas looked up as his mother set down a cream cheese bagel with lox and a cup of coffee. "So, are you going to tell me why you are really here, dear?" Mrs. Spencer asked knowingly as she sat and took a sip from her own cup. "I saw Sybil yesterday," Lucas offered by way of explanation. After letting the statement hang in the air, Mrs. Spencer cleared her throat. "And how is Sybil, dear?" "Don't you know, Mother?" Spencer challenged darkly. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," she hedged. "I've already been to see Mrs. Moore," he said dryly. "Well, yes. After her remarkable turnaround, we've settled into a beautiful rhythm, she and I. Suffice it to say, the exploits of our children have come up on occasion." Mrs. Spencer explained. Lucas, his eyes flashing with anger and hurt, read between the lines. "You knew, didn't you? You knew about the miscarriage. And you never told me. How could you do that to me? To Sybil?" "Lucas, please let me explain." "Explain what? How you manipulated us? How you drove a wedge between Sybil and me? You knew how much I loved her and you still interfered," he exclaimed. "I did what I thought was best for both of you. Sybil was going through so much, and I couldn't bear to see her suffer any more than she already was," Mrs. Spencer said. "Best for us, or best for your image and your precious social standing? You never wanted Sybil for me, did you? You always saw her as unsuitable," Lucas accused. "That's not true, Lucas," Mrs. Spencer gasped. "I cared for Sybil deeply, but I also saw the path she was on and I knew it would destroy her and you. I was trying to protect both of you." "Protect us? By lying and manipulating? By suggesting that she move away? By keeping me in the dark about my own child? You have no idea the pain you've caused, Mother. No idea," Lucas seethed. "Lucas, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice heavy with remorse. "I never meant to cause harm. I only wanted what was best for you." Lucas's voice was firm, his eyes unyielding. "You overstepped, Mother. You interfered in our lives and you caused us both immense pain. I need you to understand that." Mrs. Spencer nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I do, Lucas, and I sincerely apologize. I will do everything in my power to make this right." Running his hand through his hair, Lucas's expression was clearly one teetering between anger and sadness. "I said some unforgivable things to Sybil last night, and never once did she mention your involvement. Why?" Lucas asked.
his voice strained. If I had to guess, I'd say because she still loves you and didn't want to hurt you any more than you already were, Mrs. Spencer whispered. Lucas pondered quietly on that. I don't even know what to say to you right now. I need some time, Mother, he finally replied as he stood. Kissing her on the cheek, Lucas stepped purposely from the room, leaving his mother alone with her thoughts and regrets. Sybil was halfway through the third episode of her favorite Netflix series when her cell phone rang. Looking at the display, she sighed deeply before pausing the show and answering the call.
Good evening, Mom, she said stoically. Hi, baby. How are you doing? Evelyn asked in an effervescent voice that Sybil was still unused to hearing. Sylvia hasn't texted me, and our standing call isn't until next week. Is everything all right? Sybil asked, sitting up to focus more intently on the conversation. Lucas Spencer came to see me today, Mrs. Morse said softly. In Cliffhaven? What did he want? She asked, genuinely surprised that he'd run home after last night's drama. To get the whole truth. As mother and daughter conversed, additional details surrounding the young couple's relationship came to light. So, you knew about the miscarriage, Mom? Why didn't you say anything? Sybil asked incredulously. What could I say, Sybil? Evelyn whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I was so lost in my own grief that I couldn't see how much you needed a mother. You'd become the adult that I couldn't be when you should have been allowed to be a kid. In USC? Sybil asked, a painful realization dawning. After you'd gotten into that accident, Kimberly rushed over to get me. When she saw that I couldn't get out of bed, she promised to take care of everything. I didn't learn of the full extent of her plan until after you were discharged from the hospital, but I didn't disagree with it either, she explained. What do I even say to that? Sybil laughed cynically until a sob choked her. Don't say anything, Sybil. Just let me show you how sorry I am and that I can be your mom again if you'll let me. Evelyn Moore expressed passionately. I need time, Sybil whispered. Take all the time you need, daughter. I'm not going anywhere. Sybil's final day of sessions were uneventful, but had given her something to think about besides the spectacle of her personal life. She had just been preparing to begin the mock post-game interviews and press conference engagement training when a commotion at the back of the room grabbed her attention.
Miss Moore, I need to speak with you urgently, came Lucas's gruff voice as he made his way through the back auditorium doors all the way to the front of the room. I'm sorry, Coach Spencer, but as you can see, we are in the middle of a training session, Sybil responded tersely. My apologies, but this cannot wait, he replied stubbornly. My apologies, but it will have to. Sybil did not miss a beat. As he climbed onto the stage and they stared one another down, the murmurs from the players could be heard throughout the space. In that case, I'd be more than happy to address our unresolved matter here and now, he threatened. The whispered modulations around the large hall were now a loud crescendo of excitable voices. What are you doing, Lucas? Sybil hissed. Clearing the air, he stated flatly. Fine, but not here, she relented angrily. Early lunch, gentlemen. You are dismissed. Lucas said over his shoulder, his hand at the small of Sybil's back as he led her from the auditorium. She followed him to a secluded corner of the complex, where a small garden with benches and lush greenery pressed out from amongst all the concrete and chrome. The tranquility of the hidden oasis was a stark contrast to the chaos of the training facility. Facing one another, the weight of their shared past hung heavily in the air, making it difficult for either of them to focus. I heard you stop by my offices to talk yesterday, Lucas began gently. "And I heard you went all the way to Cliffhaven," Sybil replied. "Syb, why didn't you tell me that my mother was behind everything?" he asked frustratedly. The instant tears that filled Sybil's eyes spilled over. "Because your mother made me promise not to. Everyone knew that your star was on the rise. You were so driven and determined, Lucas. She said we shouldn't distract you from football. She said it was for the best. And I believed her. I was so alone, Lucas. So alone, but I believed her." "I'm so sorry, Sybil. I would have never let you leave if I had known," he insisted vehemently. 10 years, Lucas. 10 years, and you never once thought to reach out, to ask why I left?" she demanded, her hands clenched at her sides. Lucas's eyes darkened with guilt, his voice a low growl. "I was hurting, Sybil. I thought you didn't want me anymore. I was a fool." Beneath their shared anger, there was a current of longing, a pull that neither could deny. As they stood there with the weight of their past threatening to overwhelm them, a spark ignited between them, a spark that grew into a flame. Sybil reached out, her hand cupping Lucas's cheek. He leaned into her touch, his eyes never leaving hers. "I never stopped loving you, Lucas," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Lucas's hand covered hers, his thumb tracing her jawline. "Nor I you, Sybil," he replied, his voice a low rumble of desire and longing. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, a kiss that held a decade of longing and regret. It was a kiss that promised forgiveness and a future, a kiss that ignited a fire within them both. As they pulled away, breathless and yearning, they knew that their journey was far from over. But for the first time in a decade, they were ready to face it together. In the 6 months it had taken Lucas to prove to Sybil that not only was he a winner on the field, but the winner of her heart, they'd embarked on a journey of healing and rediscovery. Lucas, true to his word, spent every waking moment proving to Sybil that he was committed to their future. He accompanied her to therapy sessions where they both worked through their past traumas and the manipulations of their families. Together, they navigated the complexities of rebuilding trust and understanding the depths of their love. Sybil, in turn, opened her heart to Lucas, sharing every fear and insecurities that had plagued her for years. She revealed the full extent of her mother's decline and the guilt she felt for not being able to save their child. Lucas listened, his heart aching with a mix of sorrow and determination. He vowed to be the rock she needed, to support her in every way possible. Their love story became a beacon of hope for those around them. The players and staff at the Wolves facility watched in awe as the two navigated their relationship with grace and resilience. Lucas's dedication to both his work and Sybil was unmatched, and Sybil's expertise in public relations earned her not only continued respect in her field, but representation opportunities for players nearing free agency. One evening, before his cross-country travel for an away game, Sybil stopped by the training facility on her way home to see Lucas off. Now a staple amongst the Wolves, no one gave her a sideways glance, even though some players still flirted relentlessly to get a rise out of their coach. As they strolled through the garden where they had shared their first kiss, after reconnecting all those months ago, Lucas took Sybil's hand. The setting sun cast a warm glow over them, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Lucas turned to Sybil, his eyes reflecting the golden hues of the sunset. "Sybil," he began, his voice steady and sure, "from the moment we met, I knew you were the one for me. Our journey has been anything but easy, but it has only made our love stronger. I promise to be your partner, your confidant, and your greatest supporter for the rest of our lives." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. As he opened it, Sybil gasped, her eyes welling up with tears of joy. The ring was simple yet elegant, a symbol of their enduring love. "Sybil Moore, will you marry me?" Lucas asked, his voice filled with emotion. Sybil nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I've waited a lifetime to say yes to you." As they embraced, their lips meeting in a kiss that promised a future filled with love and happiness, the world around them faded away. In that moment, they were just Sybil and Lucas, two souls intertwined, ready to face whatever life threw at them, together. Their wedding was a celebration of love and resilience, attended by friends and family who would witness their journey. As they stood at the altar, hand in hand, Sybil and Lucas knew that their love was unbreakable, forged in the fires of their past and tempered by the strength of their commitment to each other. In the years that followed, they built a life filled with laughter, love, and shared dreams. They welcomed children into their world, nurturing them with the same passion and dedication they had for each other. Through it all, their love remained a constant, a guiding light that led them through the darkest of times and into a future brighter than either of them had ever imagined. On a quiet evening, as they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard, Sybil leaned into Lucas, her head on his shoulder. "I can't believe we almost lost this," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and gratitude. Lucas kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "But we didn't. We fought for it, and we won, and we'll keep winning, together." And so their love story continued, a testament to the power of forgiveness, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love.